Welcome to another episode of Uncovered Podcast. Jarrod Kimber and Barrett Sundaresan is gone. No, he is being kidnapped. If you can find him in the Adelaide Hills, please deliver him back to the podcast. But as it is, I am here in my parents' house all alone. Um, you might be able to see my parents' sport trophies. Wrong side behind me over here if you're watching on the YouTube. I just wanted, I've talked about this a couple of times before. I just saw it as we're about to start the podcast. I'll try and explain it very well if you're listening on the podcast, but if you are viewing, I will hold it up here. This is a trophy my dad got for taking a 9-wicket haul in a club cricket game for a North Carlton Cricket Club, who I don't think exist anymore, but a turf cricket club back in Melbourne in the old days. So he took 9 for 65 in this. And I've talked a lot about ball tampering, and you hear this a lot from people. They say things along the lines of, ball tampering, it's, Pakistan and reverse swing and all this sort of stuff. This is 1975 in Melbourne, and my dad did not trouble with reverse swing at all. But if you're watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see that the seam is being completely picked all the way through and get it as high as possible. So it's it's a different kind of ball tampering that we get in modern cricket. Point being that balls have always been tampered with, but it's a beautiful little trophy as well. Cheeky little 9 for him. Sad to say for those who that he was unfortunately using a ball that may have been. So if you were playing against North Carlton in 1975, please leave a comment below. But let's start with the IPL. I think the first thing is we just finished Power, which the article's out, and I think the video will be up probably while I'm speaking to you, if not very, very soon. Riku's working on that as we speak. The thing that I was most amazed with so far in the tournament is just that everyone's 2-1 because you've got those two teams. I think Mumbai have lost 2 games, and Delhi have lost 3 without winning any games. It's just this logjam of teams with this really, really similar record going ahead. Now, who knows how long that will go? There's a couple of teams who had some very easy runs to begin with. I think there are some poor teams who probably snagged a couple of games. But that is a fascinating way to start a tournament, to have so many teams sort of logjam at the top and then have Delhi, who, even if they have a really good season from here, are going to struggle to make the finals. And Mumbai, not as bad because they've just played the 2 games so far. But fascinating to that. But I suppose the most important one at the moment, I'm just trying to find the tweet because someone sent it through to me. But I think the most important, most interesting thing that we've seen so far is Rinku Singh, who, someone sent me a tweet, and I'm just trying to find the exact stats on this, but it was absolutely amazing. The probability of scoring 29 runs with sixes last 5 balls of the over and winning the game. So this is from, check's name, Clark Prasad. So Clark Prasad sent this through to me on Twitter, and he's got here that the answer is that it's a 0.016% chance of doing that out of 1,000 times, meaning that we need to see another 6,250 games for that to happen. It's fascinating. We will eventually obviously get to a video on him. I also saw another interesting argument, and I don't know who sent the original tweets, but I know that Jimenez sent the follow-up where he basically said that a lot of people said that it was amazing that happened in the last 5 balls. I understand why people have said that, but Jimenez's point was then made, that he made was it's probably not that much rare in the last 5 balls because those are the last that you're actually trying to hit sixes. So generally we see more sixes at the end than we do anywhere else. But it is interesting, there's a lot of old school sort of cricket fans who know the pressure and everything else, but there is more, and you can go back to the Carlos Brathwaite situation. There's also a great game with Marchand Delanger, I think, where something remarkable happened off the last ball of his game. Things do change right towards the intensity is upped, and you suddenly have, it's much more like baseball. So I think I wrote about this, it might have been in the last IPL. We did something where we were looking at what's the best way of putting it, the way the death is different to other forms of cricket. And I've done episodes with Jay Dernbach and Harry Gurney about those sorts of things as well, guys who've bowled a lot at the death. But it really is completely different form of cricket, and it becomes a little bit more like baseball, but obviously like a hyper version of baseball, because you don't get 5 home runs in fights in the way that you can in this particular over. But I just think the whole thing was fascinating, and I think again it shows that T20 cricket is moving towards that sort of thing. And I wasn't as shocked at I woke up to the tweets. I actually went to bed because I thought that game was over. So I'm huge at that. I was also very tired. But I went to bed, so I missed it, and got up and watched a replay of it the next day. And going through Twitter, I think a lot of people were more shocked at it than I was. And I remember in 2016, even the Carlos Brathwaite one, I remember I was sitting next to an English journalist during that over, and he said, "Oh, West Indies are done." I went, "No," and he said, "West Indies are done." I said, "No," and then Carlos did that, and I sort of turned to him and I said, "I think that's where the game's heading." Not that I thought Carlos was going to hit 4 sixes and 4 balls, and the way that he actually finished that game. But I do think now that I don't think this is a 1 in 6,250 matches situation. I think it's unlikely to happen again for someone to win a game. That I think certainly Clark had something to do with that. But in general, we're certainly in a situation where we're going to see more and more of those sorts of things as the game does develop towards that, especially when we're looking towards the end of the game and things happen from that end. So, it is, what's the best way to put it? It is certainly a great for the IPL. And as I said, I think the tournament started, reasonably well. You've got all these different winning situations happening. The situations happening, I should say. You've had a couple of teams, I think the fact that forget that victory, but just, Kolkata, I think it was quite an important win for them. You would want probably Mumbai to beat Delhi going ahead, so that if one team, that means Delhi will be 0-4. That's pretty much then done. But it keeps Mumbai still, they'll only be 1 and 2 at that point. And so all the other teams will still have a reasonable chance of playoffs. We've got the power rankings out if you want a detailed look at all that sort of stuff. I've got a video coming up on Faf Duplessis that I'm not too far from finishing, and we've got some really cool stuff going ahead. We've actually been doing a bit of a deep dive in old IPL stuff, which is really cool. Myself and Cheyenne have been looking at the MVP worthy seasons in previous years, and players who just had absolutely incredible performances. I'm trying to think of anything else I had from the IPL. There's a couple of other things. I touched on some of this in the video on the power rankings, but it's worth actually talking about it a little bit more. So not Delhi. Well, actually, I'll start with Delhi. I did a bit of a deep dive into, how they've gone and everything else. And this is going to sound very weird, but it's something that we don't talk about enough in cricket, is that we kind of don't talk enough about form. And what I mean by that is, in Delhi's case, they've obviously absolutely terrible so far. They haven't even been in the 3 games. But when you do go through their entire lineup, if you take out Lalit Yadav's 1 innings, I think he's only played 1 game. Everyone... almost another drinking game, Lalit Yadav on this show. He is, if you take out his 1 innings, I think David Warner and Kuldeep Yadav are really the only players to put in plus performances, certainly more than 1. Even holding their own, there's a lot of Delhi players who haven't done that. You can argue that they haven't put their squad there as they should have. You could argue that they maybe overestimated some of the local bowlers. And you can certainly argue that they could have a stronger batting lineup than they currently do. I think these are all the things to say. And if we get to the 8th and 9th game and they've got 1 or 2 wins, that's the way we're going to... I just knocked the cricket ball down. That's the way that we're going to be thinking about that. However, really, the one thing that has happened at Delhi so far, if you only have 2 players who are putting in decent level performances, that is something that you cannot control. It's a really thing, and it's... I think there are probably some coaches who believe they can control it, and certainly some that would say that they have the ability to turn it around quicker, and others would say that they have a way of at least mitigating this factor. But let's say I'm right, and 2 of the players are putting in a average performance. He's making a lot of runs but scoring slowly. Kuldeep Yadav's probably playing above standard. If the other 9 are playing below where they should be playing, those may not be good enough, but a lot of them are good enough. What can you do? It's a really, really interesting argument about professional sports that sometimes I think we don't think about enough. I remember being with Scotland when Scotland was struggling during their World Cup qualifiers, and I think it might have been Ian Bishop who ran over it once and said, Jarrod, what's going wrong? And I was like, just a few of our players who are in form haven't really, a few of our players who are our best players just haven't been able to do what they should have done. And these things happen in professional sport. And I don't know if that's where Delhi is. I can't see them as being a team that should be 0-3. Actually, let me take that back. Any team could be 0-3 in T20 cricket. You can get 3 close games and be on the wrong side of them. To a position where they haven't played very well in any of those games, I think is really, really interesting. So they should have a bounce back. The problem is that they face Mumbai in their next game, which is at home, which is huge. As I said, if they lose that, they're basically already looking at next season. But they should get a win out of that, which should mean that they'll be 1-3 at that point. They're not that far away. More of their players get into form, things can turn around from there. If they do lose that, though, even if their players catch fire for the rest of the year, probably just too far behind, right? They would have to be exceptional from then on in. It gets really, really tough in these short seasons to have a bad form lapse. And perhaps, it's only 3 games. That may be still enough. At the rest of the year, if they go at 600, they might still not squeak into the finals at that point. It's really, really tough to have what you would say. And we saw it with the Sunrisers last year. Sunrisers bowlers were bowling really bad as a unit. Then they had a couple of games where all as one, and then they went back to being quite bad. Probably having a few players that were quite bad. That was it. That was their season, right? They had, I remember, did they win 3 or 4 games or in a short period of time? They didn't have anything else. It's T20, because we have these short seasons. It's really, really finite. You see this in maybe another good sport would be the NFL, where they have those shorter seasons. There's not much you can do once you're behind this. The other thing I thought was interesting from a trend perspective was the I've now forgotten who it was. Oh, RCB and their boss. So RCB have been absolutely terrible. There's only from 2 games. They've been absolutely terrible in the back 10 or so overs of their inning. Again, there's another trend there to, for you to start saying, they don't have good death bowling. But you go through it. Reece Topley only played 1 game, but they had Mohammad Siraj and they had Harshal Patel. They actually have the bowlers that you should need to be good in that second part of that innings. Harshal Patel has currently got 2 as a ball in that period. Again, you shouldn't expect, unless Harshal Patel's injured, because I do think, and I've seen Dwayne Bravo do at the time, you are a bowler who relies so heavily on the drop of the ball from your slow ball. Even the slightest injury I would assume it would be maybe fingers, but more likely wrist, elbow, or shoulder, means you can't get that revolution and you do struggle a little bit. I'm not willing to say that is what is happening at the moment, but unless that is the case, he's not going to go at 2 runs a ball. So, I can see why RCB fans are probably pulling their hair out at the moment, and but the Delhi fans are probably completely bald. But what I would say is, going ahead, I don't think you have to be too worried about that if you are an RCB fan. You can do any super chats you would like and chuck them into the group. It's just me today, and I am terrified of my parents' Wi-Fi, and hope it will stand the test of time as long as possible. But we'll go to a break, and then after the break, I want to talk about something very funny that happened in county cricket, a little bit about Bangladesh Island. But here's an important message. If you like what we are making here and you want to know if you can help out, well, you can. On top of asking super chats on our lives, you can also support us through Patreon or buy me a coffee. The more support we can get, the better and more videos we can make. On Patreon, there are plenty of other things we offer too, like a Discord server, the chance to ask questions directly, AMAs, and early versions of our recordings. This channel only exists because people like you help support it. We have to buy equipment, software, pay wages, and my mortgage, I suppose, just to make this stuff happen. And if you don't have any money available to spend, it isn't just your money we want. Shares, likes, retweets, comments, subscriptions, the little bell icon thing, all of it. They help us build and become more professional, make more videos, better videos, all that sort of stuff. So thank you for watching everything we make and for all your support so far. Yes, do everything I said in that ad, of which I've already forgotten which ad it is, of course. But it was the YouTube. Yeah, support us. Yeah, it's huge for us. The more that you can help. County cricket. So there's a great game, and I'm not going to forget all the teams involved. I think it was Nottinghamshire, Hampshire, and first week of county cricket fans, obviously. Not the same sort of number that you get for some of the T20 leagues, but they're very, very passionate and very, very interested in their career. Pardon me. I'm very interested, in their teams, the leagues, and it was great watching them get excited again on the Twitter and everything else about the league and league competition. I don't know, county cricket. And on that note, there was a very good game between. Well, not a very good game, actually. And Hampshire would go on to win quite easily. But Hampshire chasing a total against, let's say, Notts. I'm going to go with Notts for now. I should probably check that. One's already corrected me. But yeah, and in that, I think it was Ricky Wessel's, who I think he might have watched one of our recent videos. He commented on Twitter about what it is. I think he was batting with James Vince. Or am I getting all this confused? I may be getting all that confused. Anyway, shout out to Ricky Wessel if he is watching any of this stuff. But I think James Vince was batting, and they had the extra half an hour to get the total. Unfortunately, in half an hour, they ended up 1 run short, and it was tea time. And so, cricket being cricket, they had to pause at tea, and everyone had to wait 20 minutes for what was the absolute inevitable result that was they're going to be able to pick up this last run was Hampshire. So then after tea, after the minute that no one needed and no one wanted, but cricket had enforced. After the break, they came out and they bowled the one ball. I think the wicketkeeper might have actually bowled for them and was hit away, and they won. This is the thing. There's a part of me that says that cricket itself no favors. And if you go back and have a look at a lot of people tweeting about that particular incident, they'll say things along those lines. And I get it. And I don't even disagree with that. What I would say is that cricket allows for so many stupid moments that in the social media age, we have to think about cricket a little bit differently, or sport in general a little bit differently. There's a web series that they do on Space, which is called, I think it's called Stupid Sports Rules, or I can't remember the name of it now. Sorry to that. They go through looking at all different stupid laws, and in some ways it allows you to get attention for your sport in a very weird and wacky way. Now, you might argue that it loses more actual fans because fans would be furious at the fact that 20-minute tea was taken. Maybe they're right. Maybe casual fans don't like that. But I do think watching people go in real time at that, and you were thinking, well, they're tweeting about a county game, right? And, there are many different things that go viral. I think Sussex might have collapsed during it that they're doing as well. I think that's right. That one also happened. These sorts of things that people think are bad in the social media era actually work really, really well. Prized innings, controversy, all that sort of stuff that cricket boards and sporting bodies around the world don't like actually can be really beneficial. Anyway, county cricket's back. If you've got your team, go and have a look. I am in the UK, so I didn't really watch much, but I saw a brilliant delivery. I think it was by Chris Tremaine to Zach Crawley and cartwheeled him. The one great thing about county cricket is the amount of red ball cricket we actually get to see and all the highlights that we get to see of it. So please show me more of Chris Tremaine bowling English batters, if at all possible. The test series that was played this week was Bangladesh Island. I think we recorded the podcast during the last one, so I probably said a little bit on this, but I did think that Ireland did very, very well to stress that game. As far as obviously Bangladesh was probably the better team in that situation, but the fact that several players from Ireland stood up, it's their test match in, I want to say 4 years. Is that right? Can that be right? I think that's right. So I just made that up. Andy Balburney had been making the joke that he'd been captain in waiting. In fact, he was on my podcast one time and I called him the captain. And he said, well, I'm not technically the captain because I haven't led a side yet, which I think is being a little dance. But this was a man during lockdown who, made cricket teams out of household items. So cricket teams, cricket players. He's something with household items and cricket during lockdown, so he can do whatever he wants, as I'm concerned. But look, great for Ireland that they actually played a game. There to be a slight renewing of energy for Ireland cricket, and teams getting back on board, playing them again after what seemed to be, especially during COVID, they were one of the easier teams to sort of move away from outside of the ODI league, of course, where everyone had to play them. But I think it's really important for them to have another go there and play as well as they did. The other two things I want to talk about is quite small. I did with IPL, this international cricket, and we'll cover the IPL more and more over the next couple of weeks. But generally, this is a global and not about the IPL. But there's a couple of other things that happened. I'm gonna have to sneeze, I think. Fake sneeze. You never hear Donald Trump talk about that one, do you? A Fairbreak is out. I've seen a couple of the games. I think, if to me, a slight step up in the quality over last year, which is great, because I think it's brilliant Fairbreak exists, and I think there's a lot of us happy to whether it be men's or women's, see a truly international T20 tournament. But in this case, the fact that so many associate players from around the world getting a huge chance, you're not gonna get anything negative from that perspective when it comes to the way that we're doing that. But what I would say is that when you're watching it, the difference between the best players and the worst players is huge. I can't think of another professional cricket league where I've ever seen that. I include the Canadian, what was the Canadian tournament, the Global T20. I just don't think there's ever been a bigger differential between players and the worst players. And for Fairbreak to work, I think overall, it does have to be a good product. It can't be something that gets goodwill from sponsors because of a women's tournament and because it has players from around the world. It can't get backing from whoever it is, the United Nations or whoever else who's involved with it, and all the different people, or private backing from players whose whose children might be playing in it. It eventually has to work as a B product, so it does have to get better, and it does feel like it's made a small step up in that from last year. The other thing I wanted to talk about was there was an article in Cricket. Can't remember who wrote it, but someone pointed out that this was the first World Cup in 2023 where all the captains are going to be new. So I'll just run through. I can't even remember all the captains in the last World Cup. Sorry, that will be in this cup, because obviously there's been so many changes. But I did have. So if you remember that photo, which was Kane Williamson standing awkwardly in a corner, and who was Virat Kohli man spreading. I'm actually looking at the photo now. Remember it. But the captains, obviously, Kane Williamson is no longer captain. Virat Kohli is no longer captain. Faf du Plessis is not playing for South Africa at all. Ollie Morgan has retired. Bruno Ratner is no longer captain. Sarfraz is no longer Pakistan's captain. Gulbuddin possibly still could be captain out of these people. Aaron Finch has gone. Mashrafi's knees finally gave up. I suppose I actually had already given up, but he finally gave up on his and Nathan Holder. Really interesting. I wonder how much of that is just random and how much of that is T20 driven. Have changed a lot, but that was something that I noticed. That article is a really, really interesting thing. To point out something like that, it does feel like we are seeing a cultural change within cricket from that point of view. So when you look at those players, I'm trying to think who is still playing on. So there's a few players that are still playing on. 4 years now. Well, it just feels longer than it ever has before. Was my other thought about that because we have so many World Cups, and we've had 2 T20 World Cups since the One Day World Cup. It just feels that there is a longer period now than we've ever seen before. But because so much changes in T20 cricket and the way that cricket is run and all sorts of things, things haven't just moved on so much. But maybe it's not. Maybe it's just a random thing. But interesting that it's never happened before. Well, I suppose it hasn't happened since 1973 was the first women's one, and 1975 was the first men's one. Have I got those years right? I think I've got those years close. Was it 72 for the women? I can't remember now. We will take another break, and after the break, I'll get anything that is in the chat. We managed to keep my parents' Wi-Fi as long as possible. Let me tell you a story. When I was a kid, people would ask my dad if he wanted me to be Viv Richards, and he always said no, he wanted me to be Boycott, because apparently he liked boring things. But anyway, it turned out I could be neither. But thanks to Bodyline t-shirts, I can wear clothes showing both players. The Boycott stick of rhubarb is one of my favourite t-shirts. I really like the design. And it's not the only one I love. There's also a WG Grace one where he's in a pedalo, which is a part of my everyday wardrobe now. But there are heaps of other cool shirts on this site, and you can search for them by nations or type, and they seem to add to them all the time. I'm a big fan of the Court Marsh Bold Lily in the Australian collection, and there's also a lovely Morning Everyone in honour of Richie Benaud's great greeting. The English area has the Fast Leg Theory shirt, which I think is a ripper. There's a couple of great West Indian ones I love, including this simple Viv Richards design, and a couple of Capel Dev t-shirts in the Indian section that I simply must have. I'm not saying that Bodyline t-shirts will have something that you will like, but I will say this: they got me to wear a Jeffrey Boycott inspired t-shirt. And that in itself is a minor miracle. Yeah, support them. They support the show. I don't have any of them on, but I think I'm trying to remember what the last one. Oh, I think Power Rankings. I'm wearing the WG Grace Pedalo shirt, which is a top class shirt. Will says, any thoughts on the World Baseball Classic? Oh, wait. Actually put those on the screen when they're comments. I know. Any thoughts on the World Baseball Classic success and blockbuster? And what's the best bowler matchup in cricket? We never saw it at a high level. I didn't really watch much of the World Baseball Classic. I think I saw some of the clips online. This is completely, but I was at the Australian Sports Museum at the MCG. I think it's called the Australian Sports Museum or the Melbourne Sports Museum, whatever it's called. And I saw the original baseball hats that the teams used in the Olympics. And they were they're like a cross between a baseball cap and a baggy hat. My mum used to have my old North Melbourne one, but maybe that one's gone. Yeah, it was absolutely remarkably, the combination between those two things of, it looked like a cricket baggy green belt baseball cap. So that's all the thoughts I have on that, Will. So almost no thoughts at all. And you said, what's the best bowler batter matchup in cricket that we saw at all? I think the one that I liked, there's quite a few, but I think the one that I liked the most was Kirtley versus Viv. I think that's absolutely remarkable one that we would have only seen, I suppose, club cricket. So you would have seen sort of that as Kirtley was coming through as a young tyro. We wouldn't have seen that at the international level. I saw Mark Ball play Shane Warne a few times in Shield cricket. I think that would have been an interesting one. I'm not sure that's quite on that same level. What else? Ray Linwall and Bill O'Reilly versus Don Brown. Those are the two. You can probably chuck Clary Grimmett in there as well if you'd like to. Dale Steyn versus Callis. Is that an interesting one? I'm not sure that's completely interesting because Callis isn't that kind of player, right? Wes Hall versus Gary Sobers would have been an absolute butt, I would have thought. Certainly two of the players of their era. I'm trying to think of the ages there, but yeah, I think that one probably overlaps quite well. There must be some really good England ones that I'm not thinking about as well. I would have liked to see Jimmy Anderson versus KP because we saw KP struggle with Muhammad Asif. I think that would have been a really, really interesting one. Trying to think there. Ashwin versus an Indian left-hander, but I'm not sure there's been an Indian left-hander unless you count Shikhar Dhawan or Jadeja quite on that level that could have done anything. Oh, actually, Kumar versus Murali, I think. Or maybe we saw that at the IPL a little bit. That would have been a really, really good one, especially in red ball cricket. I think Kumar's probably got one of the best records ever. And I suppose if you do that, you probably throw in Rahul Dravid versus Anil Kumble. So those are the ones off the top of my head. Oh, actually, the one that especially from old cricket, that would be really, really interesting would be Barnes versus Hobbs. They were definitely the two best cricketers of their era, and going up against each other would have been an extraordinary one. And they probably didn't even play each other much in county cricket because obviously Barnes refused to play county cricket a lot of the time. Will says, ODI rules, pink ball, 40 overs, power play at the end. I don't think we need to make the one-day cricket any shorter. I'm not sure that helps it in long term. 40 overs. I've got, pink ball. I think I said this on a recent episode. I think it's a better ball than the white ball. So I think, it's probably, if you want to go back to one ball, and I think everyone would prefer to go back to one ball, I think the pink ball is the much better option. Power play at end. No, I don't like power play. I've said this before. I think, and I don't care if one-day cricket or T20 cricket does it, but I like the idea of players out for the first, whatever it is, fourth. 3 players out, then 4 players out, then 5 players out at the end. I think that's actually quite interesting. I don't think you want a power play at the end where it's really easy to hit sixes. I haven't really enjoyed it in the big bat as much. And you've had, teams suddenly slogging at the end. So that's not been for me. Oh, I should say, if you do want to ask a question, best way is, of course, on this one is to go to the super chat. I'm not sure if I've had any super chats. I'll have a look in a moment, but I'll definitely answer those. But there are some other questions that have come through. So I says, what do you think of the review for no balls? Do you think the exposure at this level will let us know the silliness of waist high no ball? Do you think exposure at this level will let us know the silliness of waist high height no ball? Quite what you mean. I mean, waist height no ball is a really important thing. I think, because especially it's unsafe delivery, and so it's and I don't know if you've ever played cricket. I played cricket before that was automatically called as a ball, and I saw lots of people get caught and facing balls that really high, either trying to hit them very hard and not being able to get on top of them, or spooning them up because it was a dangerous ball at their head. So I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Review for no balls. I think I wrote about that 3 or 4 years ago, maybe even longer ago. For me, it has made no sense. I've had fights with TV producers about this. Like, it was just an obvious thing to have an instant, have a system that allows you to replay the ball instantly on slow motion, and do it that way. So, no, I'm a big fan of that. I'm glad that it finally brought that in. Bloody Bugger on Patreon. Who's in Inferno? I'm very confused. Anyway, he says, in light of your recent video with Raf Nicholson about the 100, what is the future of the blast? Will it just become a day out for drunkards? I think a lot of people argue it's always been a day out for drunkards. Yeah, I think it's very, very different. I think it still has a place. I don't know where it will end up eventually. This is one thing that we're not very good at cricket is, there was a time when first class it was very important, and that second division of cricket was very important. And you look at people who follow European basketball, the G League, or minor league baseball, or all these sorts of other things that exist around the world, that people know it's not the major competition. And the same thing's going to happen for IPL and every other T20 competition. People know they're not the major competitions. That doesn't mean that you don't develop them. It doesn't mean that you don't keep them going if they have a good audience. It doesn't mean that you don't look after them. For cricket to be really healthy in the UK, I would have thought the blast is a really, really cool thing to do. It goes to a lot of rooms that don't have cricket. A lot of players are going to get a chance to play in the 100. It could be a really interesting and fun development. The problem is, if you only ever have your top level league, I think that's always stupid. So, no, I think the blast is really important. I mean, I would look at it as, I think the minor league in America is one of the smartest things they did for Major League Cricket. The baby bash in Australia could have pushed more. The smat in India is something. And I don't just mean from fans, but from developing talent. If you want to be good in international cricket, you want as many people to have as much access to it. Plus, then you have the other thing we're talking about, finding audiences in places. You might get, it might be that everyone buys the shirts of the 100 teams and the IPL teams and the big bash teams, but you might actually be able to, in the long run, get more fans in more regional areas by having these tournaments in other places. I think they're really important. So, I think that the blast should be stay around for a long time, even if it is just for drunkards. Oh, sorry, knocking the computer there. Adam says KKR is underrated. They have an interesting batting lineup. I really worry about their top order. I like their middle order. I mean, I suppose at the moment everyone likes their middle order, but I do worry about their top order quite a bit. And I don't think you can be a consistently good team without a top order that can at least, You can be like Mumbai when they had the great middle order and maybe more of a working class top order. I don't think you can be in a situation where your top order doesn't work particularly well and your middle order can save you. It's just too many weeks to ask for that to happen unless everyone has freakish years. Ryan says, a little bit late, thoughts on Australian home soil limited overs game not being on free to air for another 6 years. It's not a perfect situation, but there is cricket on free to air position. I mean, it's obviously a huge mistake by Cricket Australia originally to knock the Channel 10 offer. I mean, people in Cricket Australia will talk about corruption in cricket in other countries, and they'll throw other countries on the bus when you talk to them privately. That TV deal where Channel 10 didn't get the right, it's hard to say that there wasn't an corruption to that. And I think that the keeping cricket off, keeping white ball cricket, as you said, off free to air for a long period of time may have some ramifications. I would say that I just think white ball internationals in Australia are not that important, and they're not the way the ones were. So I don't know if it's going to have as big an impact on Australian cricket as a whole. But more cricket on free to air TV is where we should be, and I think that's a huge effort. I should say, as streaming becomes more important, I think the whole free to air argument becomes less important. But casual fans, if you want to use that, I think limited overs cricket is probably a still pretty good way of doing that. And so hidden away to pay is not ideal. Pranjal says, man, just uploaded a video while being live. Very importantly, that Muku uploaded the video. Media is on the chat with me. Lots of great people work for the channel. I don't know if I've ever uploaded a video onto this channel. I might have done one or two early on, but it's very, very unlikely I've ever done it. I used to do it obviously back in the day, and I might have for ESPN even back in the day. But on this particular channel, I've been lucky enough that Muku's been around. Aria used to help out when we first started. Obviously Mida and EJ have been around. A lot of people chipping in, and Muku's the man, the myth, the legend. And we'll do one here. EKG says Sri Lanka will do very well in the World Cup, especially since it's Asian conditions. I'm not sure I feel great about Sri Lanka's ODI team. We don't know they're going to qualify. I haven't looked at the latest points tables on all that sort of stuff. But let's just say they do qualify. They will do better than I think some of the, it might be a situation where, let's say, somehow Sri Lanka didn't qualify for the World Cup. And some of the other teams did. Sri Lanka might do better than some of those other teams because it is Asia, but I don't think Sri Lanka would finish in the World Cup as one of the 5 or 6 best teams. T20 cricket, I think they're more on the fringe of that, but one-day cricket, they would have. I almost think Bangladesh has jumped them in that. I do think they're way away from the best teams. But, we've seen them improve in Test cricket and in T20 cricket. Maybe one-day cricket is the next one as well. And I'll just go to the live chat, see if there's anything else. Oh, thank you. We have a super chat. Let's see what else we have. I'll see. Okay, we'll go to the super chat first, which is Pranjal, who says contributing to pay for Bharat's ransom. Yeah, I mean, Bharat. I should probably crop this out and put it on social media. But if you have seen Bharat in the streets of Adelaide, just see if he's blinking well and if he's holding his fingers in any cryptic way. And if he is, then I'm not going to get Adelaide. So he's on his own. And Pranjal had one more. He said, I recently read about old Hoss Radburn, who pitched all 3 innings, consecutive games in April. Any bowlers who bowl comically large number of overs for a long time, say close to half. Yeah, so I think the bowlers, Spin Murali is the one with, I believe, the highest percentage of overs bowled in his career. I look at some of his games, it's absolutely remarkable. I don't know what his highest percentage is. And then you've got Fazal Mahmood and Richard Hadley, seam bowlers who bowl just, again, extraordinary amounts. There are some games that Garfield's overs because he bowls as a seam bowler and then as a spinner. So there's some huge ones there. You go to early cricket, the amount of times that just 2 bowlers would bowl, sometimes in an entire game, is remarkable. I think it's an Arthur Boyle. I think it's Arthur Boyle, isn't it? Yeah. So the Demon, quite off. I think there's a game where they destroy the EC. It's just the 2 of them who bowl. And I think there are test matches because quite often when you look at these stats, I've done the TalkSport when we're doing it live, like, which bowlers have bowled best percentage? And it's just like, in the old days, they were ridiculous. There was an Australian captain, I think he was one of the great players out of Australia, George, I want to say Giffen. I've forgotten his name. But he had some monumental spells at time as well. So it has happened quite a bit before from that perspective. So it's something that probably in modern cricket has actually slipped away because you just don't want to be able to do that anymore. But certainly there's some massive one. I think Murali is the last cricketer that we've seen who's bowled huge percentages. But you will occasionally, I suppose, Ashwin would be up there of recent times. That's why I said I should just keep them with three-person bowling attacks. They don't need another person. Anyway, that's the end. Oh, actually, so I just followed up on his no ball question before. Just get to him. I'm not questioning its existence, waist high, no ball. But when you technology, you need the rule to not be vague. Should it just be judged on impact point or at wicket or at the cricket? Yeah, so it's a little bit tricky because I think in a purple we would use Hawkeye, but of course the batter is quite often striking the ball outside of their body when it comes to waist high no balls. And so it is a little bit tricky from that perspective because you do actually need to look at the projected path a little bit. But yes, I agree. I think there is a much better way of doing it. And it should be, we're still looking at the batter when the batter is taking the shot, but we know that their legs are buckling and all these sorts of things. I would have thought the much better option would be, superimposed where the batter was standing when their legs were straight. Also measurements on the screen, all sorts of different things. I don't think we've nailed the waist high no balls at the moment, but it's still a big step in the right direction. Anyway, that's it for today. Big thanks to my parents and their Wi-Fi. I'm just having a look at my dad. This is my dad's hat trick ball. A little bit of fingernails here. Again in the seam. Also, the trick was over 2 games, but the club gave him that ball anyway. A lot of contention in our family whether that is a hat trick. And this is what's he get here. This is him taking 7 wickets up against Pascoe Vale Central. Again, probably another club that doesn't exist. Again, that's a little bit of seam. Looks a little bit. Also, this ball's gone a weird shape. Anyway. Since I'm in my dad's office, I might as well. Huge thanks everyone for coming onto the comments and everything else. Thanks to Bodyline T-shirts. We've got a new sponsor coming up soon. We may ad for very, very shortly. Big thanks to Manscaped. I think they're taking a break. You'll all be happy that you don't have to listen to those ads much. We'll make new ones if they come back, of course, and we're talking to some other sponsors as well. But huge thanks everyone. Remember, like, subscribe, everything else. And as people have said, we are legitimately right at the moment. I've just put another video up. So if you're watching the end of this and you go, it's not enough Jarrod Kimber, we have more Jarrod Kimber. Go over to the IPL Power Rankings. And thank you to everyone for their support. And I will see you again next time. I just realized I've got absolutely nothing to play at the end of this one. We should probably have it in a play, but anyway. Here's the YouTube again. If you like what we are making here and you want to know if you can help out, well, you can. On top of asking super chats on our lives, you can also support us through Patreon or buy me a coffee. The more support we can get, the better and more videos we can make. On Patreon, there are plenty of other things we offer too, like a Discord server, the chance to ask questions directly, AMAs, and early versions of our recordings. This channel only exists because people like you help support it. We have to buy equipment, software, pay wages, and my mortgage, I suppose, just to make this stuff happen. And if you don't have any money available to spend, it isn't just your money we want. Shares, likes, retweets, comments, subscriptions, the little bell icon thing, all of it. They help us build and become more professional, make more videos, better videos, all that sort of stuff. So thank you.